Welcome back, everybody, to another episode of Raven's Haven's SCP reaction videos. Today, we're going to be reacting to SCP-092, The Beast of the Fifth Dimension, by the SCP Orientation YouTube channel. Let's get on with it.
Item number SCP-092. Object Class Safe. Special Containment Procedures. The 3,125 instances of SCP-092 are to be held in individual cases suitable for containing non-anomalous audio compact discs, or CDs, and stored in standard inanimate object lockers at Site-37. Each instance is to be individually numbered with permanent marker. Testing of instances of SCP-092 is to be done in soundproof rooms. Only one instance of SCP-092 may be examined at a time. Only D-Class personnel are to listen to previously unexamined instances of SCP-092. Research proposals which involve non-D-Class personnel listening to instances of SCP-092 require written approval from Site Command. The cadaver of SCP-092-B is not currently considered anomalous, except by association, and is preserved in the morgue freezer at Site-19. Description: SCP-092 is a set of 3,125 audio CDs, each labeled the absolute best of the fifth dimension, and marked with the names of the 31 performers who have at various times been part of the American singing group The Fifth Dimension. Each instance of SCP-092, when played in a standard CD player, will produce a distinct anomalous effect upon all individuals within hearing range. The anomalous phenomenon will last 74 minutes, the duration of a standard audio CD, during which time listeners will be unable to leave hearing range, or to shut off the CD player, or otherwise interrupt its function. As well, when the anomalous phenomenon finishes, all surviving listeners will engage in synchronized vocalization of the phrase, "Wow, that was real cool." Synchronized vocalization has been observed in non-anglophones, pre-verbal infants, unconscious individuals, paralyzed individuals, and individuals physically incapable of speech due to laryngeal, lingual, and/or buccal damage.
Okay, so let me get this straight. They tested this on babies? And even babies went, "Wow, that was cool." Because they just said they tried it out on infants. Holy shit. Yeah, the SCP Foundation does do some real screwed up stuff like that, man. That I can't really condone. But in some cases, it's actually necessary. And it's like, But that is interesting that even people with throat, that they can't speak, they actually say, "Wow, that was cool." Even though they have no way of talking. Wow.
The anomalous properties of each instance of SCP-092 are thematically and conceptually linked to the number 5, dimensions, and/or the members of the fifth dimension. As of 871 instances of SCP-092 have been assessed, and their anomalous properties formally described. Representative sample of documented anomalous properties of instances of SCP-092. Instance SCP-092-28. Anomalous property: listeners experience quintuple vision for all moving objects. Instance SCP-092-41. Anomalous property: listeners' bodies exude pentagonal crystals of elemental boron, chemical element number 5.
What?
Crystals cease materializing upon conclusion
What
of
the
CD,
hell?
but do not dematerialize. Instance SCP-092-42. Anomalous property: listeners' bodies exude pentagonal ingots of elemental manganese, chemical element number 25, or 5 to the power of 2. Ingots cease materializing upon conclusion of CD, but do not dematerialize. Listeners succumb to acute manganese poisoning within 24 hours.
Oh, jeez.
Instance SCP-092-43. Anomalous property: listeners' bodies exude pentagonal nodules of elemental cesium, chemical element number
Cesium.
55.
Oh, they're dead.
All All listeners killed by cesium burns within 8 minutes. Instance, SCP-092-79. Anomalous property. Listeners become physiologically 5 years old.
Holy shit.
Instance SCP-092-80. Anomalous property. Listeners become physiologically 5 months old. Instance SCP-09...
Dude, if you want to relive your childhood again, just listen to that for an extended amount of time. You turn back into a 5-year-old, physically. Wow, talk about, going back in time. But instead of actually going back in time, you're just de-aging. Wow.
9281. Anomalous property. Listeners become physiologically 5 weeks old. Instance SCP-09282. Anomalous property. Listeners become physiologically 5 days old.
Wow.
Instance SCP-09287.
No.
Anomalous property. Listeners spontaneously become 5 months pregnant. Pregnancies spontaneously miscarry upon conclusion of CD. In initial tests, all male listeners succumb to massive internal hemorrhaging within 10 minutes, as do 3 female listeners. Surviving female listeners succumb to organ damage within 4 days.
What?
Post-mortem genetic analysis shows that all fetuses were identical and are not related to the listeners. Instance SCP-092-126. Anomalous property. Listeners experience unbearably painful facial spasms, characterized by constant chewing and biting motions, symptoms of trigeminal neuralgia, caused by inflammation of the 5th cranial nerve. During initial tests,
Gotta look that
all
up
listeners
now. I
battered
don't even know what that
themselves
means.
into unconsciousness against walls of testing chamber in attempt to escape the pain. Instance SCP-092-175. Anomalous property. Listeners' bodies are pentasected radially, producing 5 disconnected segments, which remain alive and mobile. Instance SCP-092-176. Anomalous property. Listeners' bodies are pentasected laterally, producing 5 disconnected segments, which remain alive and mobile. Instance SCP-092-177. Anomalous property. Listeners' bodies are pentasected axially, producing 5 disconnected segments, which remain alive and mobile. Instance SCP-092-200. Anomalous property. Listeners are teleported to a site on the surface of Himalaya, the 5th most massive moon of Jupiter, 5th planet from the Sun. Listeners are returned upon conclusion of CD, but succumb to the combined effects of hypothermia, hypoxia, and radiation poisoning within 3 hours. Requests have been made to use SCP-092-200 to send exploration teams equipped with environment suits to Himalaya. Approval is pending.
That would be something. I'm like, talk about a quick way to get there. Do some exploration, and then once the music over, boom, they get teleported back. So that, you see, sometimes it can be beneficial. This is why they do such experiments. See what you can do. What's this one?
Instance SCP-092-256. Anomalous property. Listeners are converted into 2-dimensional forms. Instance SCP-092-271. Anomalous property. Listeners spontaneously lose 5 teeth each. Teeth do not regrow after conclusion of CD. Instance SCP-092-272. Anomalous property. Listeners spontaneously lose all but 5 teeth each. Teeth do not regrow after conclusion of CD.
Oh, that's fucked up.
Instance SCP-092-273. Anomalous property. Listeners spontaneously lose 5 fingernails each. Fingernails do not regrow after conclusion of CD. Instance SCP-092-274. Anomalous property. Listeners spontaneously lose 5 toenails each. Toenails do not regrow after conclusion of CD. Instance
What the hell? Are you kidding me?
Anomalous property. Listeners spontaneously grow 3 extra eyes each, for a total of 5. Extra eyes do not dematerialize upon conclusion of CD. Eyes are functional and of the same color as listeners' original eyes. D09277714, who had lost an eye in a fight prior to entering Foundation custody, grew 4 extra eyes when listening to SCP-092-278.
To replace the one.
Instance, SCP-092-279. Anomalous property. Listeners experience topological deformation, such that their height becomes the circumference of their waist, and vice versa. Deformation reverts at conclusion of CD. This appears to be an exchange between listeners' dimension of height and dimension of width. Instance, SCP-092-285. Anomalous property. Listeners sneeze 5 times per minute for the duration of the CD. Instance, SCP-092-286. Anomalous property. Listeners belch 5 times per minute for the duration of the CD. Instance, SCP-092-287. Anomalous property. Listeners hiccup 5 times per minute for the duration of the CD. Instance, SCP-092-288.
Alright, these don't seem
Anomalous
so bad.
property. Listeners cough
Yeah, they don't seem so
5
bad.
times per minute for the duration of the CD. Instance, SCP-092-315. Anomalous property. Listeners find themselves within the 2010 Lars von Trier film Dimension, where they are able to interact with the setting, but not affect the actions of the characters. Since Dimension is only 27 minutes in duration, the events within the film repeat 2.74 times. Instance SCP-092-316. Listeners find themselves within the 1993 EastEnders Doctor Who crossover,
Oh, yeah.
Dimensions in Time, where they are able to interact with the setting, but not affect the actions of the characters. Since the 2 parts of Dimensions in Time are only 13 minutes in total duration, the events within the episodes repeat 5.69 times. Instance, SCP-092-317. Anomalous property. Listeners find themselves within the 1963 Italian film Amore in Quattro Dimensioni, where they are able to interact with the setting, but not affect the actions of the characters. Instance, SCP-092-397. Anomalous property. Listeners experience random moments in the life of Alan Shepard, the 5th man to walk on the moon.
Wow.
Instance SCP-092-399.
They say they can't interact with the characters in the film. I wonder if that means, like, if they try and hold them, they're so strong, they keep moving and acting and doing, and you're like, and you can't stop them, or do you just phase through them like, but you could interact with like a cup, pick up a cup, put it over there, do stuff like that. You know, I wish they would have went into a little bit more detail on that.
Anomalous property. Listeners experience random moments in the life of James Monroe, the 5th President of the United States. Instance, SCP-092-400. Anomalous property. Listeners experience random moments in the life of Mackenzie Bowell, the 5th Prime Minister of Canada. Instance, SCP-092-401.
Everything's 5 or dimensions.
Anomalous property. Listeners experience random moments in the life of Edward Seaga, the 5th Prime Minister of Jamaica.
Yeah, man, Jamaica.
SCP-092-402. Anomalous property. Listeners experience random moments in the life of Charan Singh, the 5th Prime Minister of India.
Yeah, everything's either 5 or has dimensions in it.
SCP-092-403. Anomalous property. Listeners experience random moments in the life of Helen Hayes, the 5th winner of the Academy Award for Best Actress. Instance, SCP-092-466. Anomalous property. Listeners are physically transformed into members of the original lineup of the 5th Dimension, as they were at the time of the group's establishment in 1966.
Nice.
Instance, SCP-092-467. Anomalous property. Listeners are physically transformed into members of the original lineup of the 5th Dimension, as they were at the time of the original group's dissolution in 1975. Instance, SCP-092-468. Anomalous property. Listeners are physically transformed into members of the original lineup of the 5th Dimension, as they were at the time of the original group's reunion in 1990. Instance,
That's crazy.
SCP-092-469. Anomalous property. Listeners are physically transformed into members of the original lineup of the Fifth Dimension, as they are today. Listeners who transform into Ron Townsend, 1933 to 2001, resume their original forms after conclusion of CD, but do not resurrect. When an instance of SCP-092 is inserted into the CD drive of a personal computer, its files can be accessed without triggering the anomalous effects.
Okay.
Examination of the files indicates that each CD has different content. All content is audio material by or pertaining to the Fifth Dimension and its individual members. In addition to all known commercially released songs, files contain live performances, practice sessions, auditions, media interviews, and personal conversations. Acquisition log. On May 5th, an unidentified man, henceforth SCP-092-B, carrying 2 suitcases, approached front gate guards at Site-19 and stated that he wished to surrender himself and his anomalous creations into Foundation custody. The contents of his suitcases were confiscated and classed as SCP-092. SCP-092.
Yeah, sometimes that happens. Very rarely, but sometimes anomalous creators or the anomalies themselves go to the SCP Foundation to either be protected or because they've done something wrong, like, oh, I made this anomalous thing and wound up killing my whole family and I didn't even realize what it was that I created. So, I'm turning it in and I'm turning myself in because I have the ability to do this. And, I'm trying to safeguard the world from myself. Sometimes that happens. Or sometimes, like in the case of a member of the Are We Cool Yet organization, art organization, anomalous art organization. One of them turned themselves in because they felt they were garbage. They were garbage artists. But it turns out it was another artist who didn't like this artist that gave him an anomalous artwork that made him lose his shit and made him turn himself in. So sometimes it's things like that, rival anomalous organizations or beings doing things like that to each other.
92B was transferred to Site-37 for interrogation. During interrogation, SCP-092-B revealed the thematic connections, 5 dimensions, and the 5th dimension between all instances of SCP-092, and then committed suicide.
See?
Transcript of statement made by SCP-092-B upon arrival at Site-19. Guard. Sir, this is private property. You can't... SCP-092-B. This is a secret Foundation site, right? Guard. You can't come in here, sir. SCP-092-B. You're the SCP Foundation, and I'm a failure. Guard. What was that, sir? SCP-092-B. You're the SCP Foundation, and I'm a failure.
This is, I bet you
he's clever, but I'm not.
That's the same thing. The last Are We Cool Yet anomalous member that turned himself into the Foundation said when he went there, I think I'm clever, but I'm a piece of shit. And It turns out because he was like a mediocre artist, and another artist that was in the Are We Cool Yet organization didn't like it. Didn't like his artwork, didn't like his style. He was subpar, mediocre, and he gave him an anomalous artwork that made him say that about himself and make himself turn himself into the Foundation. This sounds like this. Anything that has to do with art, whether it's music, sculptures, paintings, most likely it's the Are We Cool Yet organization. How much you want to bet it's probably these guys? Let's listen.
I'm a stupid, boring, knuckle-turning hack who thinks that money and cheap puns can take the place of talent and inspiration. I'm tasteless. I'm dull. I'm incompetent.
This is
I have
what
no
they do
sense
to
of
people
style,
like that.
And the only reason I'm not an art criminal is that nothing I've ever made is even close to being art. You can secure me, and you can contain me, but no one can protect me. Please take me and my anomalous garbage into custody. At this point, guards summoned backup. SCP-092-B repeated this statement verbatim until he was taken into custody. Excerpt from transcript of
Yep.
SCP-092-B interrogation session number...
That's what the organization does to members who don't consistently live up to their artistic standard, their anomalous artistic standards. This is what they do to those members. They anomalously, they use some sort of anomaly to screw up their minds, to make them go to the foundation, and then 9 times out of 10, they stay there permanently, or they kill themselves. I bet you this is the Are We Cool Yet? This has something to do with the Are We Cool Yet organization.
2. Interviewer. Yes, we understand about fiveness, thank you. That's been most helpful. But we were also wondering what you could tell us about how you made these.
Yeah.
SCP-092-B.
I have a hell of a
I
riddle
just wanted to be
doing this.
cool, you know?
See?
I really did. I thought, well, I had my inheritance and my collection, and there was the estate and the abandoned museum, and so much of the stuff went together, and it wasn't that tough, and look, my ideas were better than yours. They were. I know they were. No, they're not. Nobody's impressed by this stupid facile wordplay. It's not even good wordplay. It's kindergarten level paranomasia. Oh look, 5 dimensions, what other things can you think of that come in 5s? I'm worthless. I'm worthless. Interviewer.
Yep.
Better than my ideas? SCP-092-B. There's no deeper meaning to what I did. It's all just superficial Potemkin village crap pumping imitation shit into the river of human achievement. It's Stein's Oakland, and I don't even understand those illusions. I'm an uninspired wannabe. I'm boring. I'm a useless hack with no imagination. I've wasted and ruined miracles. I've squandered so much raw material that better people could have done so much with. I'm not cool. I never will be. I'm really sorry about the mess. These aren't my arms. At this point, SCP-092-B seized his own head with both hands and ripped it off his neck, killing himself instantly. Lesson complete. If you missed the previous orientation, go watch SCP-091, Nostalgia.
Yeah. This is what the Are We Cool Yet organization does to one of its members who doesn't live up to who doesn't consistently live up to their anomalous artistic stylings. Tell you, they're an organization that needs to be stopped, but you can't really stop them because they're very quasi. They're not a organization per se. They're loose. They're a very loose knit thing. One of their creation is the statue that you have to constantly look at it, and if you blink, it teleports by. It doesn't teleport. It actually moves so fast that it moves that fast that it moves behind you, and snaps your neck if you blink. That statue was a creation of of somebody who was a member of the Are We Cool Yet organization. Yeah. So there you go. I'll put a link in the description to this video and to the SCP what is this? The SCP Orientation YouTube channel. All right. So yeah, that's the end of the video. And with that, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Raven's Haven.